From here in Rome to the far-flung reaches of the Catholic Church, much is being written and said about the legacy of Pope Francis, his fearlessness in wading into fraught political debates like immigration and war, a man who created a church both more open to divorced and LGBTQ Catholics, but closed to the idea of married or women priests. It is a complex legacy that frustrated progressives and conservatives alike, but also raises the question of how much of what Pope Francis changed will essentially stick. And that will be up to his successor. Joining me now, Father John Bartunek, an NBC News and MSNBC contributor. It's good to see you, Father. We've talked in this hour about changes to policy. We've talked about the Book of Rights. We've talked about the elevation of so many new cardinals now making up the majority of voting cardinals. But I wonder, in a broader sense, how much of Francis's impact do you think is here to stay?
It's a great question. You know, it's always a lot of conjecture. Can't really tell the future. But I think some of the most important of his contributions are definitely here to stay. Let's take, for instance, just a couple of them. One, I think that a lot of people overlook. There is what we talk about a lot of clergy about the Francis effect from a point of view of like everyday life of so many Catholics. As soon as Pope Francis became Pope, I remember as a priest being in an airport, being out at a restaurant, and people coming up to me who were Catholics but who hadn't practiced their faith for a long time. And somehow the pastoral generosity and warmth of Pope Francis made them want to come back and give a second chance to their faith. So I'm thinking there are so many of those people who have come back to their faith, have rediscovered their faith, and that's going to last regardless of who the next pope is. I think also, if you think about it, we have had over 10. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No. Please continue.
Yeah. So also, we've had now over 10 years of a new generation of clergy under Pope Francis. The young ones being formed in the seminary, young priests who have begun their ministry. And one of Pope Francis's most constant themes was for us as priests, as ministers of the gospel, to put encounter before doctrine. Don't get rid of doctrine, but realize that doctrine has to be accepted by a person. So he really emphasized, you remember the famous phrase of a shepherd should smell like his sheep. We should be out there encountering people, not having a prejudice, encounter everyone. So there's a whole generation of clergy that has kind of absorbed, and especially the seminarians, the young priests, have absorbed this as their approach. We're going to start with an encounter. We're going to meet people where they're at. We're going to bring the gospel to them, show how it's relevant, how it can make a difference. So I think that's something else that's not going to change. The third thing I would say that doesn't matter who the successor is, the church's conception of itself. Pope Francis emphasized so much how universal the church is, the peripheries. Everyone is invited to be part of this great adventure of living the gospel. And then also the way that he reconstituted the College of Cardinals. So this sense that this universal vision, I think that's kind of seeped into the mentality of so many of Catholics over the last 10, 12 years. And I don't think that's going to change either. So I think those are some of the lasting parts of his legacy.
There is a challenge, I think, because American Catholics tend to see the entire church through their own eyes, their own experiences, their own sensibilities, and I think also their own social beliefs. Yet they only make up about 6% of the church worldwide. As someone who has worked on the Synod of Bishops, somebody who obviously works in a world that is global, I know you spend a lot of time here as well as back in Michigan. What do you think American Catholics should know about the global church?
Well, I think that the most important thing that we all should keep in mind is that we're all called to be missionaries, right? We're all called to be kind of going out to new corners to bring the gospel, right? So American Catholics, if we just keep that in mind, I think it's going to help put the different pieces in their place. Like certain pieces are more important than other pieces, right? So there may be differences about what's the best policy for immigration. And Pope Francis had no fear about weighing into those policy questions. But that's less central than, hey, everybody is actually called to have a friendship with Jesus Christ, to discover the meaning that comes from that. And I think American Catholics, with our American kind of entrepreneurial spirit, to put that at the service of the mission of the church, I think that's going to be one of our greatest contributions to the church throughout the world. We're creative thinkers. We like to find solutions, and we put that kind of at the service of this mission, this universal mission of the church. I think that's going to help us not get distracted by secondary things and really kind of help the mission go forward in a way that I think Pope Francis was really hoping that it could.